President Trump attempting to revise history as he defends embattled Senate nominee Roy Moore. The New York Times reports the president is casting doubt on the authenticity of the Access Hollywood video in the final weeks of his campaign. You remember, then candidate Trump actually apologized the next day for his words. Listen.
I've never said I'm a perfect person, nor pretended to be someone that I'm not. I've said and done things I regret, and the words released today on this more than a decade-old video are one of them. Anyone who knows me knows these words don't reflect who I am. I said it, I was wrong, and I apologize.
This should settle the notion of whether or not the president believes that the tape is inauthentic. He would have never apologized. It's the only one he's ever given if he thought there was any wiggle room. Let's bring in CNN political analyst Jonathan Martin. He co-wrote that New York Times report. You laugh, but my thread is blowing up with Trump people who are like, well, how do we know it's a real tape? And maybe that's why Billy Bush isn't around, because it was, and what about the timing of it? You know,
like
he plants a little seed. That's how I see people on Twitter. It's like a toxic cauldron.
I'm chuckling, Chris, because as you point out, he is not somebody who's given to easy apologies. As we, no, he's very reluctant about apologizing. But in this story that we wrote yesterday in the Times, we are talking about why this president is so determined to stick with Roy Moore, even as all of his colleagues in the Senate, fellow Republicans in the Senate, are disavowing Roy Moore. And one of the reasons is because he sees in these charges against Roy Moore echoes of the women who came out against him last year during his campaign. And so, it turns out, we found out doing some reporting, my colleague Maggie Haberman in particular, that he is still consumed with this issue of the Access Hollywood video and is musing in private to his staff, even to some senators, that he doubts that it was actually him on that tape. Now, as you point out, he apologized and said, it is me, in that statement that you guys displayed there. But I think he does not want to come to terms with the fact that he actually was caught saying this stuff.
I'm pretty sure Billy Bush thinks it was him on the tape. I'm pretty sure Billy Bush, who was there and has lost his job as a result, would confirm that that was Donald Trump. So, but Jonathan, what happens in the White House when the president starts revising history and starts going back over reality? What is the response to the staffers or the members of Congress who hear him say that? What do they say to him?
That's a great question. And I've actually had this conversation with some staffers there and with members of Congress. And I think a lot of it is sort of dutiful, head nodding, a modicum of engagement, and then a quick attempt to kind of change the conversation. In fact, when Reince Priebus was still there were moments where I think he would nudge members of Congress to actually steer the conversation back to a sort of safer terrain.
Reince Priebus was said at the time with the apology, this is true Trump. This is what he feels in his heart. Do you remember that was Priebus weighing in on this apology?
Right.
Look, the reason I think it's instructive, Jonathan, is he can't believe what he's saying. So you have a lying issue. Okay, that's not new. But what is an important reminder is if the president is capable of making this kind of fugazi statement about something that he knows is authentic, it lends an understanding into why he finds it so easy to cloud the water the way he does on issues that matter. He is okay calling into doubt things that he has no reason to call into doubt. Look at the Russia investigation. How could he call it a witch hunt? This is how. Because this is how his head works.
And as you guys know from covering this president, this approach is not new for him. He wrote in his book, which I believe is called The Art of the Deal, if I recall, that that there's nothing wrong with a little bit of hyperbole.
Truthful hyperbole.
Truthful hyperbole, Chris. You've read those words a few times, I bet. And so this is sort of his signature going way back. When I interviewed Senator Bob Corker a few weeks ago, he said very candidly, the president says things on Twitter that are not true. You know he does. I know he does. Everybody does it. This is a U.S. senator saying the president is basically lying on his preferred medium on a regular basis. So the kind of shock value has somewhat worn off. But we thought in this piece, guys, it was instructive because in the context of Senator Roy Moore, and by the way, you can find this story on nytimes.com. Also, the top of my Twitter feed, JMartNYT. A little plug there for you. But we thought it was instructive in this story because he sees Moore almost as a victim-type figure who's facing these accusations after years have gone by from women. And that, I think, got to him last year. And he is still sort of living those accusations. And post-Harvey Weinstein, I think this is more and more on his mind. And that gives him a measure of sympathy for Moore that a lot of folks on Capitol Hill, guys, just don't share.
Yeah, for sure. And we see it dividing some in the GOP. Jonathan, thank you very much for sharing your reporting with us.
I appreciate it.
We have a quick programming note.